I am just curious, who has a SOC in-house or works with an MSSP? Just familiar with SOC in general. All right, good show of hands, that's good. So today we're going to talk about automation, right? The thing that we've learned, it's just it's kind of a new topic, and a lot of times it's associated with, hey, you're not adding any value, right? You're passing tickets. It's a whole lot more than that. So I'm going to tell a little story, and it's a winning recipe, but I like to call this one, it's kind of a love story, and love-hate. So we'll jump in. All right, first I got to figure out how to do this. Navigate, there we go. So just a little background, little context on why you should sit here for 50 minutes and listen to this dude. Humble beginnings, I think a lot of people do, right? But the point is, just started humble beginnings, scratch, Claude, got my way to RIT. I'm sure most of you have heard of it. And, went through the program and started at Xerox, like a lot of co-ops do. And worked over here in City Center, and we consolidated 110 data centers down to 2. And then I was like, man, I like this architecture thing. Went off, started my own company, and we built 3,000 websites all around the globe. And then Wix happened, and you could get a website for $10, and that wasn't very profitable. So anyway, I went in, I started working in cybersecurity. So started with this company. Some of you guys who have been doing this for a while, with Surf Control. It's a little web filter company. It was purchased by WebSense, and it's all web security gateway, and I was there for 7 years, and did a whole bunch of stuff, and mostly technical stuff, pre-sales, product, enablement, channel sales engineering, but a lot of channel stuff too, channel programs, channel ops. I like to say those two strengths. Got married, had a baby. It's called SciFlare, and we're actually born right out of Victor, New York. So we started our office in Victor, and the journey began. But literally walked into a warehouse and saw this picture on the top here. Rust is dripping down the walls, and I was like, took about 3 minutes. This is perfect. I'm liquidating myself. I'm quitting my job. I'm going all in. I'm starting this security operations center. The crazy thing is, so I did a lot of email security, firewalls, endpoint security, DLP, for big companies, Exelon, TD Bank, Humana, Health and Human Services. But I had never done anything with a SIM before. So what's this guy doing? Liquidating himself, jumping in, and now he's going to run an MSSP. That's crazy. But we did it. And so we turned that warehouse full of stuff into something that, it's attractive. People want to come in and work. And in the first year, we achieved top 100 global MSSP. I'm not sure how we did it, but we did. And as of 2 weeks ago, we're number 20. And I think there's a reason, right? It's not because it's the biggest revenue and all that. In fact, we're still bootstrapped, privately funded, so we haven't gone that route. Not to say we won't. But the point is, I think the reason that the analysts have recognized it is because of what we're here to talk about today, which is automation. Right, so SciFlare, it's really a verb to integrate and automate. That's what it means. So we kind of started out as a typical MSSP. Hey, we're going to take some people, and we're going to watch some SIMs and maybe endpoint solutions. We're doing a lot of Alien Vault stuff. And people have to log into those screens, always be watching it, and it was just getting out of control, right? It's not manageable. 100% manual triage, right? And as you're growing a business, you've got more and more customers, more and more events, higher expectations, and of course 0 days, right? Different phases and strains of different attacks, right? So Alien Vault's not keeping up with it. How do I really have to reverse engineer each and every one of those things? That's crazy as well. So we realized there was a problem, really to the point of like, man, do I really want to be in this? Like I think you need $100 million to do this, right? So what are we going to do about it? So, we had some of these problems, and I just want to give you guys some data points, and I call it pain by the numbers, because it is real pain. And for those who are building your own SOC and maintaining it already, you already know. Turns out it's about 3.9 million to run a high efficiency SOC. I read this stat, and then about a year and a half later, when it's costing us over $4 million. And by the way, that's just continuing to increase. It's about right. So if you really want to do SOC right, have full coverage 24/7, have enough time to properly investigate, it's about $4 million. Most of that's on staff. And then related to that, average analyst salary is $102,000. It's only increasing. And the problem with staffing, as you guys are probably well aware, 8 months, that's the average time to recruit an analyst and train them. So as part of our automation and playbooks, which we'll get into, we've enabled it so within 2 weeks, an analyst, we do a lot with RIT, a lot of our rock stars are all RIT grads. They're taking customers by week 2 because the playbooks are built, because everything is already there. So instead of this 90-day, 120-day onboarding, it's 2 weeks. And we could do that at scale. But the problem is, 3 out of 4, they're going to be gone in 12 months. They decide, hey, I caught something and my boss said, hey, you did a good job. And they're like, they want to be the VP of the world. And they go off and get another job. Or it turns out they just weren't that good, right? And so, it just didn't work out. We try to hire slow hire slow, fire fast. But, it still happens. And then, of course, incidents, depending on the headline, you guys know, it's getting out of control. So to carry on, we realize once we're getting success, right, we're onboarding customers, now it's alien vault, and then people are saying, hey, can you manage Splunk? Can you manage Sentinel? And then whatever the endpoint solution is. And of course, we wanted to grow, so we're saying, yes, 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 right? And then it's like, oh my gosh, like how many screens do we need? And everybody's got to be watching. The stuff blips up, and it got out of control. So after, this was probably, 12 to 15 months in, and we're successful, right? Top 100, we're thinking things are going great. The reality is this, and the gentleman whose head is down is in the back. Manish, put your hand in the air. There you go. So that is the state of a SOC without, a modern approach. And you're just looking at all these screens. The tools, you guys know as well, no tool is perfect. They all have issues. They create friction. And so to get out of this, me and Manish worked together. It's been 5 years now, right, Manish? But it's like, this is not sustainable. We got to do something different. And so we went down this approach of a SOAR, security orchestration, automation, remediation, right? And we have to get API-centric. We have to get everything flowing into one screen so that it's queue-based. I mean, you guys know kind of the basic concept, right? And so implementation 1, we went with the SOAR platform. Everything was flowing in, right? And then Manish sends us Slack, hey team, checking in to see if we're good. And analyst replies, I did the PC version, but it was, no, we're not effing good. We have 70,000 detections in the queue. It's not going great. Like, don't bug us with your questions. We have work to do. And so, but that's the state of it. Like, is this making sense to any of you guys who are running SOCs and watching SIMs? It's insanity. But, there's just a shift. So Aman from Google, who I'm getting to know better, we're going to meet up in Los Angeles, but Google's saying by 2025, 90% of security operation workflows will be automated and managed as code, right? And it's like, it sounds technical, it sounds good, but what the hell does that actually mean, right? And Google put this out, and it just makes a lot of sense for us, right? So we went from 100% manual triage, blowing SLAs, right? It's like, this is not good, right? There's a lot of risk, liability. It's not good for clients. We got to do something soon. Deploy the SOAR, right? Now we get better sense, and immediately the playbook work begins. What are we seeing? You get intelligent about what's actually streaming in, from where, who's our noisy accounts, what are the noisy detections, what are the things we don't care about, and we do care about. The problem is we also had the shift too where it's static SIM, right? Teach it what you want it to go look for, right? And when you see it, tell me. And that's where I was saying you have to reverse engineer all this malware. It's insane. So you guys know now it's the next shift to ML, right? So we want to see anomalies, like not the static correlation rules, but machine learning. The problem is machine learning is super noisy, right? So things like login time anomaly, less noisy, like Joe's logging in from San Francisco or New York, that's pretty straightforward. But asset access anomaly, IT admins, people that are working and touching multiple apps and systems, how do you make sense of that, right? So clients are like, okay, that's enough. Like maybe there's something in here, but that's not gonna work. So you have all of those new things happening, new tools, right? And everybody's at a differing level of understanding with cyber, right? So even if you nail the ticket, right, and you do a good job, you send it and people are like, for a hospital, one of our accounts is like, Joe, this ticket makes sense to me, but you got to understand, it's just an entry-level IT help desk. And he's like, what's brute force? And it's like, oh man, we're in a whole world of trouble. So it's got to be accurate and it's got to be netted out when it comes to a client. But I do agree. I think we at SciFlare, we definitely agree on this maturity. One of the things is when we started to introduce the topic of automation, immediately it was associated with you guys are ticket passing. Because I guess fortunately for us, but unfortunately, a lot of MSSPs, that's what they do, right? They figure out how to create simple workflows and it's basically just kicking it out, low value, right? Not netting it out, not checking other things. And so automation was kind of a swear word. It probably still is. But there is a path. And then the notion here is that automation, it's a must have, a must commit to process and methodology, right? But it has to be done with high fidelity, high integrity. The playbooks have to be robust in order for it to really be meaningful and useful. So Google says that there's 5 different phases. We're in phase 4. I'll get into some of our stats and our journey. It's pretty, they're facts, right? Evidence is compelling. But phase 5, that's where we will be in just the next couple of months, automating with high fidelity over 90%. So, curious where you guys think you're at, 0, 10, 50? No one? Anyone think they're at 80 or 90? Just curious. Okay, cool. All right, so what that creates is it's a 90-10 strategy, right? Let's get to the point where 90% of the stuff is being automatically triaged, again, with high confidence, right? We're checking everything, and a lot of these things are static, right? It is bad or it isn't, and you can get to a verdict. And what we also realize is that most things are actually related to hygiene, right? It's just an operational matter. Don't get me out of bed. Don't call me. Don't text me. Like when it comes out and it's like, come on, man. It's a failed password. Like, it's obvious or nobody cares about this thing, right? It's only a few events that are actually meaningful. And so when you look at that, it's like, hey, if it's kind of binary. So, and if we know that it results in, hey, change Kim's password. She got a new phone. Like just put it in a dashboard or a report or something and give me an indicator, but don't raise it as a high alarm and bug my staff, right? It creates tons of friction. But just selfishly, like from a SOC perspective, if you get to this point of 90-10, right, automation of 90% of those things that are coming in, it doesn't mean ignoring it, right? That's super important. Within our SOC, we have a policy where we do not want to filter wherever it's avoidable, right? Like we want to, tune the solution, yes, but a lot of people say, hey, we don't care about that. And then they end up doing something stupid like whitelisting an IP or a domain or application or a user account, something like that, and then you're blind to that thing forever, right? Within our platform and our strategy, we have a concept of muting detections, right? So it comes in and you're gonna action it, but I may still want it and use it for operational value and some of the hygiene checkup type things, but it's a muted detection. So you don't lose visibility, but you're not gonna action it either. Does that make sense? It's kind of for notice. But when you do this, what it does is it relieves security staff of the repetitive stuff, right? And especially young people now, they get bored really quick, right? They're like, I'm too smart for this. I don't need to do this. Why isn't there a better way? It's funny, just growing up working on a farm, doing real hard work, and now people are like, why is it 3 clicks? It should be 2. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't help you. It's volunteer work. Don't show up. I don't know what to say. But the point is, even if they're doing the work and they're doing it right, they do get burned out, right? And just even if they love the company and things are good, it's like, I'm just burnt out. There's just too much of the same stuff. It's just not challenging. And so that just, forces that whole churn issue. But the other key thing is work on more meaningful projects, right? So work on meaningful security events, tell the tape, coordinate with the rest of the business. If it's something real or something that is potentially real, you need to really spend the time on that, right? Like get the reports, do the investigation, coordinate with the other stakeholders from other departments. That takes a lot of time and coordination. But the other piece is continuously reviewing what's happening and evaluating where false positives are happening, benign detections. How do I make the playbook better? If we did it 3 or more times, it's got to be revisited, right? Because it's going to continue to happen, and those leaks add up. It turns into more people, it turns into more time, turns into one of our customers and their brands being compromised because we just had a leak, right? It just compounds on itself. The other key thing is, you guys heard of Right of Boom and that concept that's starting to get more prevalent. Cyber Defense Matrix, Sunil Yu, former data scientist at Bank of America, came up with that. But the point is being able to focus on left of boom activities, right? So you're hiring these people, they're getting these skills, they come in and they want these projects, but they want to think about proactive stuff, right? Get left of boom where it's like, hey, I'm going to plan, I'm going to get a strategy, and not every day is ransomware day, right? And reactive. So what does that mean? Well, now you can really work on your tabletops, your incident response plan, your procedures, and get more of a program. That's one of the things we see habitually across our customers. Doesn't matter if they're super big or super small. Almost nobody has a plan, right? Not even an InfoSec policy, and if they do, it's got dust on it. Nobody knows what's in it, and it's even worse. Like Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. That's what's happening, right? It's like we had an InfoSec policy and we're kind of doing this, but then ransomware happens and then it's all gone. So, planning and having a strategy rather than throwing a bag of doorknobs at it with, hey, we need the new CrowdStrike, we need the new tool, new shiny object. It's like, why do you need that? Do you really need that? What are you going to do with it? How's it going to materially help your program? And then, of course, the ability to scale. And the last piece is consistent investigations, right? SciFlare, we're creating a company that's growing, 2 different SOCs, one here in Rochester and another in Nairobi, Kenya. And but the key thing is we didn't start the overseas SOC until we really had our framework in place so that when we do an investigation, it is the SciFlare way. Just as with you guys, as you're building a SOC or even your MSSPs, you don't want it to be, well, Daryl does it this way and Jenny does it like that. We like Jenny better. No, it's got to be the same, right? So even if you're automating and leveraging playbooks, maybe some things get fully automated, that's great. But even when it hits to the manual steps, right, you're identifying the key things that you have to do to say, you must check this, what's the value, you cannot proceed. Otherwise you end up with these empty stories, right, or things you can't understand. So that's the other benefit of enabling a SOAR platform, enabling these playbooks, is that you get a consistent investigation process so that when you get your next person, it works like this. This is what we do. I train you to understand what those things are, and that's how you get the 2-week onboarding, right? So when we don't have to train you. We don't need your artistic license. It's not Michael's, right? It's not a canvas and paint. This is how we roll. So some examples, and Manish, I'm giving you nightmares and flashbacks, but so this is an example of you got to get started somewhere, right? So we got that SOAR in place. Things are flowing. We're adding more tools. That's great. But now we need to start the process in building playbooks. And so the point is get started somewhere, right? So you create a basic workflow. I don't even know which playbook this was. And we got started, and it started to help, right? But then things change a little bit. This is what we look like today, right? So this is one of our more advanced playbooks for user login failure. But within this, I call it the jellyfish. If you turn your head right, it's the jellyfish. Turn your head left, it's a stork, maybe, something like that. But the point is, within each one of these blocks, there's a lot of stuff going on. Hey, go check and see if we have a ticket on this previously. What was the verdict of that thing, right? Have we seen this thing before? Does it match client context? So we have this concept of client knowledge base. And within that, you could take client context like, hey, this is my AD server, this is my DNS server. Functionally, that's what it's for. Here's my service providers, here's my remote access tools, et cetera. And it's dynamically injected into the playbooks, right? So if a client logs into the tool and says, this is my IP, this is my whitelist, I'm turning this on, turning it off, immediately it's sent into SOAR, and these little boxes are looking those variables up. If it matches, there's no need to process, right? If the customer said it's whitelisted, it's whitelisted. Don't make bad decisions there. And then in other cases, it's, well, we're going to continue processing, and now we want to go check for OSINT and threat intel, and we want to go get corroboration of what this thing could be or isn't, or somewhere in between, and then continue processing. And what we're doing is connecting to everything, right? So getting very API-centric, and I'm not just going to connect to a SIEM and trust it and pull for data and whatever it has. We're looking to API connect to everything so that if we need more information, for example, there's something from the SIEM, but I need telemetry from the endpoint. Let's not ask the business or the customer or whatever for that data. Hey, go pull log data. Nobody has time for that, right? We do that instantaneously, right? We're API connected, we go get that data. Looking for yes, no's across the board. So, this is one of the more advanced ones, but you're doing a lot at speed, and I'll get into some of the numbers here, but it took us 5 years to get to this point. So just some numbers, right? And the whole point of this thing, it's not about SciFlare and, look at what we're doing. It's about, the pain train, that 70,000 detection, and that would have only gotten worse. But it's possible, right? You start with a plan, you slowly work on it, you commit. Today we have 2 full-time SOAR engineers. That's only going to grow, right? I expect that the SOAR engineer team is going to go like this. Analyst team is going to stay relatively flat and much slower growth because of that, right? Continuously reinvesting in the playbooks. You got to start somewhere, and you got to be doing something like this. But for us today, we've got 196 playbooks. That roughly represents the number of use cases we're looking for, spanning all the different tools, right? And that continues to evolve. There's always the next thing, the new MITRE TTP, the new thing, right? And customers have their own apps that they're building and bringing, and so you have to create something when you see that. But with that, you end up with, for us, MTTD for us, that's not detect, that's disposition. So we're getting stuff in the door, triaged, potentially with response actions, and getting it in and out in 2.03 minutes for all of our customers. Some of them very large. 5 Hour Energy is a customer, Denver University, Juilliard School, and then some very small. We got 1-seat accounts. But the point is, 2 minutes to get something in and out. And the endpoint, honestly, it's a little easier because they're prevention tools. If they know it's bad, well, then you can immediately act on it, right? It's a little trickier with SIEM and XDR because it's a signal that you need to corroborate with everything else. It takes a little more time. But we've been able to get this down to 12 minutes, mean time to disposition with the SIEM and XDR side of the house. And what's fundamentally different here, because of our approach with API-centric, it's not tied to, well, we can only manage Splunk or Logarithm or single tools, and most people have 2 or 3 tools. We support 26 SIEMs, 32 different EDRs. And honestly, if there's an API, we support that too, right? It's easy to spin up these integrations. And we map it all to MITRE, right? And a lot of the ML use cases, they don't cleanly map, so you have to come up with that. But that's how you could do it at scale and normalize instead of being an expert in Sentinel and an expert in Splunk, et cetera. And then just some of the scale points, right? 47 minutes, that's the average time for us to human triage, right? And you think about that at scale, all these detections, 47 minutes, people take breaks, right? People are researching, and you're also asking them to go get certified, right? Like, that's a lot of time. So we want to keep that minimal, but it still has to be high integrity. We can't just be ignoring stuff because it's convenient, cheap, fast, or any of that. We get fired for doing that. So, but conversely, our playbooks, we affectionately call it Alfie. It's the origin on that is wise counsel. But Alfie is our triage bot, and he gets through things. He's the hardest working analyst at SciFlare. 3.63 minutes for all things what we call auto detection and response. And so that averages out to some of these numbers here. But these playbooks are robust, deep thought, right? And MITRE gives us some of the homework, right? They say this is the detection data you need, the tools, the types of data you should be sourcing, and here's the remediation steps. So the point is when we go and we say, hey, we did this investigation, no longer do we get this, hey, well, why didn't you guys check this? This is a bonehead ticket. Like, it's just, low value tickets. And then, of course, you add real world stuff on top of that. But the point is 175 steps. And it's not just like drag and drop. Like, there's code involved in this stuff. It's not easy. And by the way, the SOAR platforms aren't cheap either. It's going to cost you $100 or $100,000 a year just to look at it, right? And then you got to know what you're doing. You got to get trained. So it's not trivial. It's not cheap. But the proof's in the pudding, I guess. And today we're delivering 98.3% true positive rate. That's super hard to do, right? Our promise is 97%, but 98.3, that's where we were last month. And then this is kind of, this is where the meat is, right? This is just evidence, right? So this is our analytic data from, looks like November of 2020. I wish I had the data from the original, because it would have been brutal. It would have been an absolute cliff. But our mean time to disposition was 241 minutes, right? And then it slowly got better. We were starting to do some tuning. I'm not sure exactly why that happened. Maybe that was, things that we did in the other SOAR. But the company has been growing, right, pretty consistently. But what's most interesting is around May, we deployed, now we have, it used to be Simplify, it's Google Chronicles SOAR now, but that's a third SOAR we went through, right? We found out what we really needed. We went through it 3 times. We each did all the forklifting and maintenance, but when we deployed that thing, look at the cliff. I mean, to go from 117 minutes down to 10, 12, mean time to disposition. And, we learned a lot, right? It's like, hey, you guys are missing this data. And we had a lot of scrambling to do to kind of get these things high fidelity. What's also interesting is between September and now, I think at that September point, maybe we had 70 or 80 clients. Now we have over 300, right? So we've been able to take these clients on, literally onboard an enterprise. It could be any given day. It's not a major thing. And so now we're actually at around this 10, 12 minute metric mark. And we're actually, that's the predictive, these little dots, these are the predictive elements of the machine learning where we actually expect that to go down. We're not looking for 0, right? If it takes too little time, you're probably not doing a great job. But that's the, that's the power of enabling automation in a SOC, getting to the 97% true positive. And, and now I think there's a whole new world with that jellyfish. I think we'll probably be able to truncate that significantly with AI, and we're evaluating how to really use that. But we're trying to not to make a key mistake of leveraging AI and then it's failed and broken, right? So you got to do that intelligently. This is a slide that's more just logic, right? It's a flow chart. So the title of this session was a winning recipe, so I'm going to tie it back, right? I gave you a bunch of data. But the key thing is, before you sit and think, oh, we need to go get, and there's some open source SOARs too. I think Hive is one of them. I'm not quite sure. But before you think, okay, I'm going to go get a SOAR, or we're going to invest heavily in playbook building, just start with a basic workflow. And it's amazing what happens when you look at, like, when we get this, like, what do we need to know? Do we have the systems that could actually give us this data? Who's responsible? Who's the stakeholder for it? Have we even, like, I can tell you, I don't think any of my clients have an asset inventory list. Nobody knows what their assets are, right? So just start with the basics. Like, that forces a key issue because a lot of this stuff, like 99%, it comes and it's like, what is this? And of course, the network tech or the help desk or security guy's like, I don't know what the hell it is. Like, it looks like it's some Katie and she's in Arizona and I don't know what it is, right? But, I think it's just some of the basics. But starting with a core logic and flow, that's more important than really just jumping into the tech, building playbooks, doing lookups because you don't know why you're doing it, right? I mentioned about having a strategy, right? And this is a good way to kind of tease it out. So a couple of key points, right? Winning recipe. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. A lot of, I guess, details to get it right. But five main components is API first approach to security. If your team, if you're MSSP, and go challenge them. Hey, what's your mean time to disposition? What's the SLA adherence? What's the true positive rate? None of our prospective clients know what the true positive rate is, right? They go by their team's gut feel. And it's like, well, Jimmy feels like he's not getting accurate detections, right? It's like, then you're managing on mood rings, I call it. That doesn't work, right? But you should have that number. It should be accurate, and you should track it, right? And so you know what's working and not. But the other thing is, you guys probably all have an EDR type tool. You have firewalls. You have stuff for cloud and maybe a SIM platform, something collecting syslogs. But every time you add a tool, it's really 4 or 5. It's another screen to look at and have to monitor, and you're never going to stay on top of it. You have to get API centric. You got to bring it into somewhere, and that's the starting point. And then at least you can start to get KPIs. You might not like those numbers. We didn't like the numbers, but at least you're in the knowing business and you see where you're at. Next key thing is, and this is the first part of any of our playbooks, is comparing it against the customer knowledge base, right? If you're set up with multiple entities, et cetera, you can logically separate that. But the key thing is knowing what's in the environment, knowing what it is, at least the high level stuff. Yes, we use Microsoft Teams, so you're going to see data exchange, right? Now let's create a rule, like 1 gig is too much, right? Tell me when that happens, but, or maybe it's, we use TeamViewer, right? But we don't allow anything else, like raise it if it's not that. That context should at least be known and documented somehow. For us, we wanted it digital. We wanted it injected into the playbook so nobody could screw it up. But that's a key piece, is just knowing what you got. And with the tenet of making tribal knowledge global knowledge, right? People leave, people forget stuff. Well, let's centralize that stuff, right? And a lot of times I was just having a conversation with a gentleman, and he's like, I feel like our MSSP doesn't know our environment, even though we've explained it. Well, that's sitting in an Excel sheet in someone's mailbox. And even if you put it in your, whatever the system is, the analyst isn't going to look at that. It's just not going to happen. Even if they do, how long does that take? Meanwhile, your house is burning down. You can't have that, So number 3, you have to pick a framework. For us, MITRE is a good one. Some people say, hey, I don't like MITRE. And honestly, with a lot of the ML-related use cases, it doesn't directly map, right? So a good starting point is to see a piece of that in which TTP, unique ID for MITRE, it might map to, and use that as a base playbook. But you should have a strong foundation and pick a framework that works. That just helps you have high-integrity playbooks roughly out of the gate. Number 4, I mentioned a lot of the alerts. Most of them are related to operational hygiene, right? So an application, the password's changed, the token has expired, a script is still out there. Those are things that can be cleaned up when we get around to it. You don't need to sound the alarm bells, right? So what we've done in each and every one of these playbooks is look for, getting to an absolute verdict of good or bad as soon as we can. Obviously, looking against the client knowledge base helps. But the other piece is, we had to make a decision, right? And so some clients are like, we're super paranoid. Some of them just got bit, right? They've been encrypted. We've done deals where I had to send it to sbcglobal.net because they literally have unplugged, right? They can't even exchange email. But so those customers are very paranoid. They want to be told everything, and other clients are like, only send it if it's literally something's about to blow up or just did. So there has to be some middle ground, right? So what we've done is this muted detection route, or taking it down this operational branch where it's now a low, it's informational, it goes into analytics, and we're creating insights to say, hey, this is over time, continuously, this, we use Kim in our demo environment, so I'll pick on Kimberly. But Kimberly is continuing to have failed logins, but it doesn't raise a security event, especially with machine learning. The anomaly becomes the normal over time, right? So maybe on day 1, it's a score of 50, but then day 2 it's 48, and then it trickles down, and then it's never going to raise. But those types of things really help, and that allows you to focus on getting to that 90-10, right? The 10% of stuff is actually going into security events where, hey, we might want to do something about this, which is maybe block an IP at the firewall. Maybe something's going on, you want to isolate the endpoint, kill a user account, revoke MFA sessions. Those things, that's where you can really focus on the security branch. And the last one is look for an absolute verdict for each ticket raised, right? So I'll tell you, across our SOC, and it varies, but it's between 30 and 40% of our tickets that we send, the verdict is unknown. And so it's like Jerry Maguire, it's like, help me, help you. Like, respond to our ticket, tell me it's terrible, tell me it's great, but a lot of times they're getting it, it's raising on their side, they notated it, yep, I looked at it, or maybe they did nothing, but then it's there, right? They didn't tell us, hey, we know about this, ignore it, mute it, whatever. I see head nodding, right? It's like, yep, that happens. But it's super important because we might want to adjust a rule, we might want to change the playbook, but you have to stay on top of it. So even if you're deploying this internally and you're not an MSP or an MSSP, you're still going to want to get commitment from the business because you started with a strategy and a policy and the procedures, and you all said this is the stuff you cared about, and we're all going to do this. So when I send you something and ask you a question, you got to get back to me. That's the only way it gets better, and it's the only way it gets accurate. But the outcomes from that is then I'm going to tune the source tool, modify a playbook, and ultimately just get to the high true positive rate so you're not wasting time. Now, the last thing is we've talked about automation internally, right? In the SOC for the benefit of triage and mean time to disposition. But for us, what we've realized is we kept recommending the same things. And so for us, roughly 98% of common response actions are needed in order to respond to a ticket, especially in the event of a security event, something that's potentially super high risk. So for us, we identified these 6 key use cases. And by the way, these are included in the playbooks, right? And customers have the ability to say, I want it on by default, it's security first, especially with things like isolated endpoint or anything related to credentials. Those things are dynamic, that's happening automatically. As part of the 2 minutes or the 12 minutes, that's happening automatically. But they have the ability in the playbooks to say, look, you got to invoke the incident response plan first, text these people, call these people, do this, and then if it still times out within 15 minutes, we don't respond, do it anyway, right? You have options. But the point is, getting to high true positive rate, if and only if you have a high true positive rate, is automation real when it comes to the response side, because you will break stuff, right? So it could be, a lot of times, and you guys are laughing, but I mean, a lot of these tools, it'll be like, well, we're an XDR platform, because apparently everybody's an XDR platform. We're XDR, and we connect with everything. Well, which everythings? Well, we have these 10 integrations. That's not everything. There's 32,000 vendors, right? Like 10 integrations, that doesn't help me. And what's worse is that the integration is very simple. There's no logic. Got to have playbook, got to have logic, right? Because it's like, well, if I see this command and control server, or we think it is, right, then take the action to block. Well, that doesn't work because it's probably not accurate, right? Or whatever the other use case might be, but you need that logic to go check these other things. But the point is, if you get that high true positive rate, you can reasonably expect that 98% of the things that are happening, now you don't have to bug your network team. You don't have to do all of that work, get people out of bed. I like to say, don't get out of bed with SciFlare, right? Like just, set up the playbook and you know what's happening. It's better to come in and say, hey man, you knocked this server offline, instead of like, hey, you knocked all servers offline. I mean, we've had police departments fully encrypted within an hour, right? 192 machines, they lost the cases from the last 48 hours. If they had just isolated the endpoint, you would have been fine, right? And also, by the way, from that story, lesson learned, don't have a flat network. Don't have your police cars on the same network as your Exchange server. Turns out it's really bad. You can't teach this stuff, but anyway, and that was for a city in Massachusetts. And so we're watching the city, we're watching different services for the city, but not the police department for some reason, and then shotgun wedding over a weekend and a press conference for them, which was not ideal. But anyway, that's the bulk of this, but I'm just curious, you guys have questions? Are you guys fighting some of these fights and going through it? Happy to field questions. Go ahead.
So the SOC is traditionally a transaction-oriented business model,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are your thoughts about moving to more of a customer-intimate business model? What would some of those benefits be?
Well, I think, hopefully it hits the mark, but what we found is that we were talking a lot with customers about, well, we have SIM and there's this EDR technology and it's heuristic-based detections and machine learning, XDR, MDR, blah, 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 right? And I mean, that's what you guys are hearing out there as well, right? When we shifted to, we're going to focus on getting you 97% true positives and automating 98% of common response actions, is that something you're interested in, right? So even for you guys who have to sell internally, you got to go fight for more budget, you have to justify your team, the tools you already have, or the strategy change. That type of outcome discussion is the only discussion we want to have, because eventually we're probably going to break up because you never knew what you wanted to buy in the first place, so you're never going to be happy. So our view is that, number one, we don't restrict clients in terms of the tools. We're focusing on outcomes, so you're exactly right. That's where people's heads should be at, is what did the organization say they want, right? We must do the following things, and then everything starts from that, right? And if you're API-centric, you can change the tools as you want. You could say, this tool doesn't work for us. It's too expensive. We don't believe in it, right? We want higher fidelity or whatever. And you can adjust that. But the point is, you should know what your coverage is across the environment, right? Like literally, as one of our clients, you tell us what you have, and everything's API fed, and we count that. Real time, it's in the palm of your hand, right? So you know what the visibility is, because from a SOC, if we're going and say, well, it's 97% true positive rate, good news, you didn't have any significant incidents. Bad news is, we see 8% of your environment, right? Like that's an outcome you need to know. Well, okay, what are we gonna do about that? Well, we need to deploy this and do that, and this tool doesn't do that. Now you're working from a center, right? So for us, that's what it is all about. It's not about tools. There's tools we like, but it doesn't really matter, right? It's about the strategy. That's the conversation to have. Good question. Any other questions? Did that, yeah, okay. Any other questions or? Yeah, I mean, it's really it's egressing, right? So getting to escalate, and it could be Elfie, right? Our hardest working bot and analyst. But the point is getting out of the workflow, right? So you're escalating it, you're muting it, or you're saying it's just it's a false positive, it's a benign detection, close it out, right? And it could include response actions if it's part of the logic where they said, yeah, we do want that immediately remediated. So disposition, what we learned is a lot of organizations will say, well, our SLA is 1 hour, 30 minutes, 8 hours, whatever. And it's like, SLA of what? Well, response. Response doesn't help you, right? You don't need someone to acknowledge that there might be a problem, and it comes and it's an incomplete ticket and like we're looking into it. That's not feeling good, right? Disposition, thank you. Disposition is what you need, right? So I work through it. We have a guess of what it might be. Hey, it is bad. I already took care of it. Here's what happened. Well, that's a way better ticket, way better experience. So disposition for us is everything end to end, right? And it's hard to do it, and get through all of it. And we definitely have tickets where it's escalated and it's complicated, and those take hours, right? Sometimes it takes a weekend to really figure it out, but there is an average. Does that help? Yes. Yeah. Apparently I have 5 minutes, so any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
VR providers looking at tickets simultaneously?
Oh, yeah, we love that one. So, 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 yeah, we Yeah, and it is a problem though, and that's why we've taken this open XDR approach of like we will connect to everything. There's over 300 APIs available, right? And so then what we've seen, we've got one enterprise account. They have 40 companies all rolling into one. They had one SOC. They had TrustWave and Palo and all of that stuff, Cortex, and then they also had Sophos. And then they brought us in to manage corporate IT, the network traffic analysis, all this stuff, and it's insanity. You've got 3 SOCs. Everyone's like this. It's the scarecrow who doesn't know which way to go, right? And it's SOC sprawl. So it's bad. You know, you got multiple EDR tools or multiple SIMs, but now you got SOC sprawl where it's like, I don't know. I'll ask Sophos, right? I'll ask TrustWave, and everyone's in the middle. And now these people who are intelligent, they're well trained, they're just ticket brokering, right? It's nonsensical. So. We have a lot of clients that don't get all in with a CrowdStrike or a Sophos because it's an ecosystem play, right? There's a few integrations versus consolidating and have everything be open, right? So we run into that more and more. You got SecureWorks doing managed firewall stuff, CrowdStrike doing EDR stuff, and now I need to do this network or cloud detection response, and that's something that's avoidable. Sure. Yeah, yeah.
At what point did you decide that, okay, this is, some cost or, did not buy that out and said, okay, this isn't work for us?
Well, the first platform was a platform called Security. It's a local company, a local founder. He actually presented yesterday on the woes of starting a company. But they were purchased by Swimlane. And Swimlane we were voluntold that, hey, it's a forklift migration and you're going into Swimlane. Right, and then we realized, oh my gosh, it's not multi-tenant. So Manish was managing, just imagine that jellyfish, but it's like forever. It's the biggest panoramic playbook you've ever seen because every customer had to be custom built and it wasn't cascading and scaling. So then with Swimlane, we had to take that hard decision of like, this will not work for us. And then we did an evaluation and it turns out Simplify was the right solution for us. No regrets. Good question though. It was a pain train, mostly for Manish. All right, any other questions? Well, I will be here the rest of the afternoon, so if you see me, you got questions, you want to engage, please do, and thank you.